energy into it, or is the resource depleted? So these are very critical aspects of the assessment before you go into any economic valuation and any recommendation on policy. There's a whole debate on the stock-flow relationship. It's very hard to map flows because they tend to fluctuate, etc., etc. It's easier to map stocks. And the best thing, of course, is to do a series of maps over time and see the changes over time. With modern GIS technology, this is all not a big problem technologically. We all come back to the problem of data availability. Old maps have to be redigitized, etc., to get a grip on what actually is happening and where on Josh's graphs we are. Are we in region 1, 2, or 3 for the various types of resources? And of course, Josh's approach was elucidated with examples from the US mostly, but you can take them from Europe anywhere as well. And we don't have a whole lot of natural ecosystems left, so you would expect that most of Europe will be in region 2 to 3. And that will put some pressure on Brussels, I guess. And next question. Marta. Walk around. Was that Ben's? Yeah, I'll take the lady. In Spanish?
Buenos días. Maybe I missed something, but it sounds like these national approaches are a bottom-up approach. So each country is creating their own methodology, choosing different indicators. I'm curious, how are you going to synthesize this? I mean, there's a common framework. How are you going to come up to scale up all these national approaches? It seems a big challenge.
Very, very correct. This is the big challenge. I think TEEB and Patrick showed that yesterday. TEEB has provided us with a very broad methodology and a sort of procedure through collected data analysis and all the way to recommendations, etc. But it hasn't specified in each of these steps how to do it precisely. Maybe Patrick likes to comment on it. My impression of all the TEEB books that I've went through is that it's also been bottom-up, case study based, learning through doing and learning through reading, and probably Fernando's nodding. That's the case for most of the studies so far. And the big challenge for not only the Commission, but worldwide, and maybe Ben wants to comment on that. Ben Simmons is here, he's from the Secretariat of TEEB in Geneva, is that we need to develop some coherent approaches across here. And especially before we bring in more countries and they invent their wheels again, we might find a common thread and then be specific then on ecosystem services and ecosystems in all those different contexts. And that even aside from the political context, which will be different in all those places. Ben was the first one to raise his hand, but maybe, yeah.
Just to the question on putting all the pieces together and the diversity of approaches, I think at this phase, I mean, it's a case of seeing what everyone's doing and learning from everyone. And you have to have a pluralism of approaches. And then I know that by the time we get to 2014, you mentioned to 2020, and the wider issue of the national capital accounts and ecosystem, integrated in economic and environmental accounts, you'll obviously need something comparable. So I know the Commission is looking to launch a sort of a TEEB follow-up to try to learn lessons from everyone, to see which works where, and then see whether we need to keep with pluralism or whether there's any need for sort of a harmonization. And that's a completely open issue. There's no subtext apart from trying to see what works and what's efficient.
Thank you. Just wanted a quick advertisement and then a question for the speakers. The advertisement is just that, as you know, TEEB was an independent study hosted by the United Nations Environment Program. Since 2008, I've been the coordinator of that TEEB effort in UNEP. It's still alive and strong. We have released the studies, but there is a new phase of TEEB activities. I believe Patrick yesterday described some of those activities. One of the key activities is to facilitate TEEB national studies. Obviously, most of the reports we heard today, those studies are independent and ongoing, but UNEP is quite active in other studies around the world, for instance, TEEB India, TEEB Brazil, including both the federal and the state studies. And also looking to launch TEEB studies in other countries that have demanded such support, for instance, Nepal and Georgia, and there's many others. So it's quite exciting to see the momentum around TEEB and around focusing national studies in this way. I should just mention as well that the office, one of the other things it's really it's been asked to do is to continue the communications and outreach efforts. So to the extent that there are colleagues in the room that are undertaking studies that would like to use the TEEB and the UNEP platform, if you will, to disseminate information about their work, please do contact us. One of the other things we're trying to do over the next couple of years is to facilitate a number of follow-up studies, sectoral studies. I believe Patrick mentioned a few. This year we'll be looking at developing a TEEB Oceans study, a TEEB study focused on agriculture, which was already mentioned earlier this morning as a key issue to consider, and then also to support the Ramsar Convention and the TEEB water and wetland study that they'll be producing. And then finally, just to really continue the TEEB network of experts to help support various events around the world where the TEEB network gathers together. So that's it for the advertisement. Just for the question, I was fascinated by the discussion on what's happening in most of the European countries in terms of the TEEB-like analysis or valuation analysis. And I was wondering to what extent, most of this analysis is really focused at as we can see, at the national level and to really understand the baseline. And to what extent do the colleagues think there's potential that this will then be used as a way of entering into the national accounts, which would be a very natural extension of that work. But as 2020 is quickly approaching and we're supposed to incorporate these things in policy decision making, to what extent are the teams identifying policymaking processes? Because one of the things that the TEEB studies really highlight is the importance, before you undertake one of these analyses, is to really identify the policymaking process that it will influence. I mean, the risk is if one doesn't, there's a risk that study will produce some really nice values that may be used for national accounts, but may not be interesting from a policymaking process because it's not focused on a particular area. And so I was wondering to what extent discussions occurring at the national level to identify those processes.
Yeah, there's one anecdote about the Dutch TEEB. It started from a political accident where in Parliament in the fall of 2010 there was a motion by the Green Party to stop cutting the budget which was proposed by our new government and do not cut the budget on nature and Natura 2000 implementation until the value of those systems was assessed. Now the government of course reacted, we're not stopping the cutting of the budget, but that's an interesting question. Let's assess the value of those ecosystems. Maybe we can cut the budget even more. So now we're doing the value assessment that will probably surprise them. Who cares to answer, Ben, on what the political context was? Maybe Mike starts.
So I think in the UK, when National Ecosystem Assessment was developed, it was very much in partnership with the government. So I think that's a first important lesson. I think Matt talked about that this morning. So you do need to get your governments involved before doing it to make sure the outputs are relevant. With UK NEA, it is the intention to try and incorporate into national accounting in some way. I don't know the specific details. But one potential issue is how you then update the values over time. And a specific issue might be about carbon and greenhouse gas emissions. If you look at the shadow price of carbon, that's increasing over time. And does that then over-influence the national accounts with that increase in carbon compared to some other things? So I think there are some interesting questions to think about how you update it and what's the implications for difference in prices for the different services. But I'm not a big expert on that.
Belgian experience is of course interesting, but some already indicated.
The Greece project, the last workshop, which will take place in December, will bring together a number of scientists and policymakers who have been working together on several projects to check whether this cooperation went well, what the expectations were, to really check off this field, and these lessons will be taken up into next project. So if we will go on with this regional assessment, we will be sure, or we will make sure that we will communicate in a way that we understand each other, because it's really interesting to see the different ways that different scientific projects are being held, and the way that people who pay for it react, and whether their expectations are met. So this is in fact now something that is researched in order to take it up into TEEB.
Maybe I can add something special for the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, the political landscape is changing a little bit. That is because the government is withdrawing from many aspects they have to lead, and for nature they give more responsibilities to civil society and to companies. So that's also the reason that we involve these stakeholders in the TEEB study, because we have to make movements with those parties also. The government is not the only leading party, so you have to make a process with all those stakeholders, and they have to believe in it also. So companies have to believe in that they can earn money with ecosystem services. The civil society has to believe that ecosystem services is good for their well-being. All these aspects has to come out of the study.
And Germany, of course, it's the policymakers that lead the way. They invite the scientists to get busy. A week and a half ago, almost 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting in Brussels organized by DG Environment around Action 5, as I mentioned in the beginning, where François Wakkenhut, head of the unit that is in charge of the biodiversity strategy, indicated that the European Commission will call the member states to start the implementation process. So there is a political umbrella, at least in Europe, and then the member states have to pick it up, and it's still an open process, as Patrick also indicated, then how they will do that. The Commission also offered the help of JRC, the Joint Research Center in ISPRA, and the EEA to assist the member states, and now they're actually putting some money into research activities to support the member states even further. So there is at least some coordination from the top. There's a lot of initiatives in many different ways at the bottom, and the challenge for all of us involved in our different countries, but also a very interesting opportunity, of course, to work in this field, is now for the next couple of years. There's some pressure, there's some money being developed, and let's go out and do it. I take one more question, or maybe a comment for Giovanni, and now we're going off to lunch.
Thanks, Leon. I was impressed by the diagram that Robert Costanza showed in his presentation, the increasing number of papers with ecosystem services in the title, really exponential. At the same time, listening to all people here, I have the impression that those who have the clearer idea on what ecosystem services means are environmental economists, while this is not backed up yet by biophysical scientists. And I feel that the main gap in improvement is on how we are able to represent ecosystem services, maybe in maps, if you want, in order that they are useful for the achievement of the targets. So if we think that in 2 years, we have 3 years basically, we have a deadline in Action 5 of Target 2, where we have to map ecosystem services and evaluate ecosystem services for all Europe. I think that the scientific community needs to accept a sort of harmonization of approaches.
Thank you, Giovanni. Giovanni is the leader of one of the groups at the JRC in ISPRA, and project leader on the ecosystem service mapping project in these years. I'm going to close this session. Fernando? Okay, one more comment then.
Yeah, actually, it's some reflection and question maybe for you, Len. Based on our experience in Spain, is this millennium assessment or this TEEB assessment are somehow debating one to each other. So, you know, like one, they don't get together. I mean, they one say that we have to evaluate, then first to assess. And last week in Brussels, when we talked, we said like, well, probably what we should do is start the process in parallel and meet in between. But actually, I don't know how to do that. I mean, how do you can put these two perceptions of the same concept at the same time working together, and because it seems like everyone goes take this concept of their own specialty in the economic or biophysical or ecological point of view, and they try to develop their own answers. But how to put all those processes together and meet those, requirements that we have from the Commission?
Yeah, it's a good question. My personal vision is that TEEB is just the next step from the MA. 2005, the MA comes out. 2007, the politicians have decided to look more deeply at the economic aspects and the political implications. TEEB did take on board most of what the MA produced and changed only the list of services slightly. The EEA is trying to come up with an even more elaborate framework of ecosystem services to fit the accounts approach better. And we'll have a little more discussion on that. We had in our workshop yesterday a discussion on the different classifications, and we'll never stop. Deep in our heart, all these natural scientists are taxonomists. I don't think we should stop there. We should indeed move on with the ecosystems assessments, take on board the economists, and as Giovanni proceeded, many of the economists are ahead of us in thinking valuation of something relevant to society. A lot of my fellow ecologists are still sort of struggling with the fact that ecosystem services may be good or bad for their biodiversity conservation attitude. And that's another debate. We're not going to do that here in this session. But those are the issues that we need to work on in the next couple of years. Now, I'll close this session with the last word. Here we have a number of journals. We can have a wonderful debate for the next couple of years in these journals, different aspects in different journals. And I'm very happy that Elsevier was willing to accept also the policy debate in the journal. It's not going to be a scientific academic journal only. It's going to take on board policy reviews, policy assessment studies. So everybody in this room probably can submit on that. With this, I invite you to have lunch and join the workshops this afternoon. Thank you for your contributions today, and we'll see you back here in this room tomorrow morning. Thank you.